This story is inspired from a true incident which happened in the year 2017 in Los Angeles. A guy aged 45 years of age went on a rampage of not paying for his high-end dinner dates. More about this after the story. Rachel and I dated for nearly a year. I spent money on lavish dinners, spontaneous trips, and over-the-top gifts. She was the first woman I'd ever felt so strongly about, and so I spared no expense. My friends cautioned me, but I brushed off their concerns. To me, she was perfect. I believed that investing in love was an investment in our future. When I finally found out she'd been seeing someone else on the side, and worse, had been bragging about my generosity to her friends, it felt like a piece of my soul had been torn out. The revelation came through a mutual acquaintance who couldn't bear to see me deceived any longer. "You deserve to know the truth," he had told me in a hushed tone. "She's been seeing a guy named Daniel for months. I didn't want to get involved, but it's gone too far." I confronted Rachel that same night. It was in my apartment's living room. I still remember how the glow of the floor lamp cast long shadows against the wall as I stood there with my heart pounding. "You've been cheating on me, haven't you?" I asked, my voice trembling. She just looked at me, arms crossed, an unrepentant look in her eyes. "Martin, you should have seen this coming. We want different things." "Different things?" I repeated, choking on disbelief. "I thought we both wanted an honest relationship." She shrugged. You're sweet, but not enough. Besides, you're always so eager to pay. I never stopped you, did I?" That night I didn't sleep. Something fundamental in me cracked. And the man who woke up the next morning was not the same as the one who had fallen asleep. I was angry, bitter, and humiliated. For weeks, I refused to talk to anyone. My friend David, my closest confidant, tried to drag me out of my depression, but I would only grunt responses. I was obsessed with the idea that I had been used, that my goodwill was just currency in someone else's game. Months passed. Gradually, I returned to dating, though I was more cautious than ever. During a dinner date with someone named Fiona, whom I had met through a friend, I felt history repeating itself. She kept talking about her expensive tastes and her love of material gifts. My gut twisted with anger at the memory of Rachel. By the time the waiter brought the bill, my date was already expecting me to pay. She tapped her manicured nails on the table as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Are you picking this up?" she asked, her tone confident. I don't know what overtook me in that moment. Maybe it was the memory of Rachel's smug face, or maybe it was the deep-seated need to protect myself from ever being used again. I shot up from the chair, mumbled something about using the restroom, and slipped out the back door. My heart pounded with adrenaline as I walked briskly away from the restaurant, the cold night air stinging my skin. I imagined the shock on Fiona's face when the waiter would return to find me gone and her alone with the bill. I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt a twisted kind of triumph. It was a high, an odd rush that made me feel in control for the first time since Rachel. I told David about it the next day over coffee. "You did what?" He nearly spat out his drink. "Martin, that's messed up. Why would you do that?" I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "She was just another gold digger, man. She didn't care about me, only what I could buy for her." He shook his head disapprovingly. "I get that you're hurt, but this is not a healthy way to cope. You're going to attract the wrong kind of attention." Soon, I found myself concocting a plan. I started visiting dating apps and intentionally looking for profiles that hinted at a history of cheating or boasted about wanting someone who could afford luxury. It wasn't hard to find them. People can be surprisingly open about their desires online. Once I identified a target, I would strike up a conversation, making sure to dangle just enough hints about my own so-called wealth to pique their interest. My next victim was a woman named Sylvia, who boasted in her profile about wanting the finer things in life and being allergic to cheap dinners. I found her transparent greed oddly convenient. I matched with her and we chatted for a week. When we finally met at a top-tier steakhouse, she didn't hesitate to order the most expensive entree. She spent the entire night telling me about her needs and how she only dated men who could afford her lifestyle. My blood simmered as she talked. It was like listening to a remix of Rachel's old lines. When the waiter slid the bill onto our table, I excused myself to take a phone call. I vanished into the night once more, leaving her to foot the exorbitant check. Words of my stunts began to spread, though I was careful not to use my real name on these dates. I created false identities, used different phone numbers, and always picked restaurants scattered across the city. To me, it felt like a game of cat and mouse, and I was winning. Every time I left a woman scrambling to pay, I felt a grim sense of victory. Of course, not everyone took it lying down. Some of these women complained to restaurant managers, who, in turn, started reporting these incidents to the police. A few recognized me on social media and posted warning messages. David caught wind of one such post online and confronted me in person. "Martin, you need to stop this," he said, pulling out his phone and showing me a screenshot of a furious rant from one of my dates. "They're calling you the dinner skipper. It's not a good look, man." I rolled my eyes. They can call me whatever they want. I'm done being someone's checkbook. "You're gonna get caught," David insisted, face red with frustration. "And then what? You'll end up in jail with a record for fraud or theft or something worse." I waved him off. "I'm not stealing. I'm just leaving. They can't pin me for that unless they have proof. Besides, these so-called victims are not exactly saints themselves." Next, I matched with Linda, a woman whose profile boasted about her taste for designer clothes and upscale vacations. She wrote that she'd cheated on past partners because they were too boring. In my warped mind, she was the perfect candidate for a lesson. I set up a dinner at one of the most exclusive French restaurants in town, the kind where reservations are made months in advance, and the bill alone could bankrupt someone with an average salary. When Linda arrived, she was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She smiled sweetly, though her eyes seemed to size me up like a prize steer. We ordered champagne, escargot, and a main course that included a heaping portion of lobster. As the night wore on, she talked about her many admirers, how some had funded her shopping sprees, and how she expected nothing less from a potential partner. I forced a charming smile through all her stories, making sure she believed I was enthralled. The second the waiter placed the check on the table, I pulled out my well-practiced excuse about stepping outside to take a call. I grabbed my coat and walked confidently toward the door. The moment I stepped outside, two men in dark suits approached me. One flashed a badge. My heart plummeted. "Martin Reeves?" the man asked sternly. I hesitated. "Who's asking?" He pocketed his badge. "We've had several reports of you leaving women to foot the bill. Complaints from restaurant owners, too. You're under arrest." I froze, half in disbelief. Behind me, Linda stood in the doorway, arms crossed, an icy look of triumph on her face. "Guess I'm not the only one who likes to cheat people," She spat. They handcuffed me right there on the sidewalk. A small crowd gathered, whispering and taking pictures with their phones. The adrenaline that once fueled my escapes now turned to cold sweat trickling down my back. I was driven to the station, processed, and locked in a cell that reeked of stale sweat and cheap disinfectant. From May of 2016 to April of 2018, a man aged 45 defrauded at least 10 women in Los Angeles, leaving them to pay over $950 worth of restaurant bills. This man, who was nicknamed the Dinner Scammer, would take dates to upscale restaurants, order extravagant meals featuring steak and shrimp, and then leave without paying. Prosecutors revealed that 8 women were left with the bills, while restaurants bore the cost in 2 instances. In court, the man pleaded no contest to charges of fraud and petty theft. A judge sentenced him to 120 days in jail, 3 years of probation, and banned him from using dating apps. One victim quipped, quote, "He doesn't have to worry about meals now. He gets 3 square meals a day."
The story is inspired from a true incident which happened with Gwyneth Paltrow in LA. More about the incident after the story. My name is Julie, and I'm a pretty famous actress. Actually, my name isn't Julie, but I don't want to share my real name on YouTube. I want to get this story off my chest, but I can't let anyone know who I really am, so just think of me as Julie. I've been pretty lucky in my career. For the last 20 years, I've worked almost constantly. Not a day goes by when I'm not busy. My husband, let's call him Alan, is also an actor, but he's not quite as successful as I am. Unfortunately, having this level of fame comes with some drawbacks. I've had a stalker for the last 3 years. It started with very long fan letters. I usually have my assistant write back to my fans, but since he didn't include a return address, I couldn't. Then, slowly, his letters started to get threatening. I showed them to the police, of course. They promised to track him down, but he didn't use his real name in any of the letters. He just called himself Randy. He also sent the letters from different postal boxes each time, so finding him was almost impossible. Eventually, Randy started following me around. I first saw him outside my house, but I couldn't get a good look at him. Then I saw him outside my gym in my local supermarket. One day he even showed up at a filming location pretending to be a journalist. He ran off before anyone could catch him, but he left a present in my trailer. It was an animal heart in a pink box. I didn't feel safe anyway. It was affecting my ability to work. Alan and I decided that I'd take some time off from acting. For the first time in decades, I was refusing acting jobs and staying at home. Alan was such a big support through this time, and our marriage actually got stronger. That was literally the only good thing to come out of the whole experience. Months passed and the harassment continued. We added more security to our property, so I felt safer in my own home. But I was sort of turning into a recluse. Alan was still working, so my sisters stayed with me whenever he was gone. Then one day, the police were finally able to catch Randy on camera. They tracked down one of his letters to a postal box in Van Nuys, where a nearby security camera was able to catch his face. His real name was Bernie, and he had no criminal record. With that information, I was able to file a restraining order against him about a month before my birthday. I immediately felt better. Alan and I celebrated at home, and I told my agent that I was finally able to start working again. We planned a huge birthday celebration at my favorite beachside restaurant. I was so excited, but the day before my birthday, I found a small wrapped present inside my car. It was a diamond ring. I thought it was from Alan, but when I read the note, my heart sank. "No orders can stop me from being with you. Accept this or lose everything you have." I didn't know what to do. I called the police, but when they went to Bernie's house, it was cleared out. He was gone. Then I called Alan to tell him, and he suggested that we just cancel the party for my own well-being. I agreed. He said he'd hurry back home, but it would take him at least an hour. I decided to cancel my next job, too. I'd never felt more terrified. I was alone at the house, staring at that horrible ring, wondering how my stalker had managed to break into my car without getting caught. Then I noticed something different about the note. All my stalker's other letters were written in his own handwriting, but this note was written with letters cut out of magazines. Something seemed off. I don't know why, but I started searching around the house. That's when I noticed the crumpled papers hidden at the bottom of our trash. They were pages from magazines with some of the letters cut out. For a second, I thought that Bernie had somehow snuck into my house, but then I came to my senses. This letter wasn't from Bernie at all. It was from Alan. He was the only person who could have done it. But why? It didn't make any sense. Right after I made that discovery, Alan came back home. I quickly hid the trash so he wouldn't see that I was onto him. "Baby, you look terrified." He wrapped me in a tight hug and whispered that he was going to take care of me. It made my skin crawl. I pushed him away. "What's wrong, baby? I'm here now. We'll get through this together." He told me to calm down. He asked if he could see the ring. "I never told you there was a ring." On the phone, I'd said that the stalker had sent me another note, but I hadn't mentioned a ring specifically. All at once, the concerned look on his face disappeared. His expression was terrifyingly blank. "Oh." "You did it! Why, Alan?" "Just sit down, baby. Let me explain." I wasn't going to sit down. I didn't want to be in the same room as him. I ran into the bathroom and locked the door. He stood outside, pounding. "Julie, let me inside!" "Julie, you have to understand. The stalker was the best thing to happen to us. We were finally happy together, Julie, and now you want to give all that up? Go back to working all the time?" I did what I thought was right." I was too scared to answer. Confused, too. My husband of 8 years had finally revealed his true colors, and I hated him. He slid the ring under the door. It sat in front of me on the bathroom tile. "Put it on and come out, now!" "No!" "Put it on. Don't you see how much I love you?" After searching through me, I grabbed the ring and swung the door open. He stared at me on the other side. With one swing, I jabbed the ring right into his neck and ran past him. I got in my car and drove to the police station. Afterwards, I filed for divorce. I never want to see him again. And by the way, I still had my party, and it was amazing. Gwyneth Paltrow testified in Los Angeles against Dante Michael Soyu, a 66-year-old accused stalker who previously targeted her in 2001, but was found not guilty by reason of insanity. Soyu is now charged with stalking her from 2009 to 2014, sending over 60 letters and packages, many referencing her dying for Christ. Despite his attorneys claiming the letters are not threats, Paltrow expressed fear for herself and her children. She said he had also sent her a cookbook, jewelry, and items of clothing. Soyu, previously committed to a mental facility, resumed his behavior after release. In 2000, Soyu sent explicit letters and packages and visited Paltrow's parents' home, leading to his first arrest. Prosecutors argue his actions pose a credible threat. If convicted, Soyu faces up to 3 years in prison.
This story is inspired from a true incident which happened this year. 2 sisters started fighting at their father's service. More about the incident after the story.
My sister Nancy and I grew up in a very wealthy family. Our father was always working, so we barely saw him, but he made sure that we had every luxury that 2 girls could ever want. Nice cars, extravagant vacations, credit cards with no spending limits. Of course, that lifestyle went to our heads. It wasn't our fault that we never learned what it was like to struggle for anything. Yes, we were entitled, but whatever. We were lucky enough to be born into wealth, so we shouldn't feel guilty about it. Our father helped us get enrolled in 2 of the top universities in the country. Not so we could get a good education, but so we could land rich, well-connected husbands. I married Derek, the handsome heir to his father's oil company, while Nancy married Bob, an overweight loudmouth who just so happened to come from a family who built their fortune on electronics. Father was happy for both of us. We were living the lives that he had envisioned for us. Unfortunately, Nancy's life quickly changed. The electronics industry had taken a turn, and Bob's company hit a major roadblock. Their stocks nosedived, and their once mighty fortune quickly disappeared. Nancy, unable to live without constantly shopping, tore through their dwindling finances until she and her husband were in massive debt. I don't know what to do. Father has already given me 3 loans, and he's saying he can't afford to keep my family afloat anymore. She wanted me to feel sympathetic, but I couldn't. Our father was quite old now, and I hated to think that my sister was eating into our future inheritance just because she didn't know how to balance her own checkbook. It wasn't right. And the worst part was, I knew that Nancy blamed me for everything. She resented that I'd found a better, richer husband than her. I didn't really need an inheritance, but that's not the point. Maybe it'll be better if you stopped shopping so much, honey. No offense. That made Nancy furious. She always had such thin skin. How dare you! She stormed out of my house, muttering to herself. Good. I was done listening to her complain about nothing. Still, there was something that she said that I couldn't stop thinking about. Had Father really lost his fortune? That was unimaginable. He was so close to his deathbed, and I couldn't imagine that he'd die and leave me nothing. I had to find out for myself. That evening, I drove to my father's mansion. I hadn't been there in months. When I arrived, the maids directed me toward his room. Father was lying in bed, looking so much worse than the last time I'd seen him. His face was sunken, and his skin had gotten yellow. Nancy, is that you again? No, Daddy, it's me. He was surprised to see me. I really should have visited him more. I didn't want him to write me out of the will like our gay brother Nick. I helped him drink some water and acted like the loving, doting daughter. I asked him how his heart was doing. Not great. And what he'd been up to lately. Lying in bed, mostly. God, it was so depressing. Then I got down to the point. I asked him about his finances. I even mentioned what Nancy had told me. Don't worry, dear. My finances are fine. I lied to her for her own good. You and your sister will be well taken care of after I'm gone. That's all I needed to hear. I was ready to leave then and there, let him die with dignity, when he asked me for help taking his pills. He had a whole tray of medications on his nightstand. Tons of meds, though they obviously weren't working to make him better. He pointed to the bottle of heart meds he needed to take. I grabbed the bottle and fished out a pill. That's when I noticed something weird. These weren't the right pills. I used to be anorexic back when it was trendy, so I knew a Tic Tac when I saw one. Someone had replaced his pills, and I knew exactly who it was. Nancy. She knew that he was lying about his finances and was trying to kill him off faster so she could get her inheritance. And as I looked at Father's sick, yellow face, I could tell that it was working. I was about to reveal her scheme when I stopped myself. Even if I hated what she was doing, I would still benefit too. It would be nice to get my inheritance faster. So I handed him the Tic Tac and watched him swallow. I love you, Father. Then I left. 4 days later, we had the funeral. It was a grand affair. I got to show off my new black dress from Bloomingdale's. All eyes were on me. After the services, I pulled Nancy aside and whispered, I know what you did. I have no idea what you're talking about. 2 days after that, we were called in for the reading of the will. God, I was so excited. Spencer, Father's lawyer, sped through all the bequeathments that Father had given to his staff, and then he got to the important part. The deceased has stated that he wants both his daughters to live an equally comfortable lifestyle after he is gone. As such, he gives his daughter Nancy $50 million. And to Emmy, who was already well taken care of, he gives her his sailboat. A sailboat? I hated that stupid thing. It wasn't fair. I deserved half of that $50 million. Me! No, I deserved all of it, because I wasn't the one who frickin' killed him. I jumped out of my chair and dove at Nancy. I ripped her cheap-ass morning dress and tackled her to the floor. She fought back. She pulled my hair and clawed at my face. Father's butlers had to pull us apart, but not before Reginald, Father's driver, got caught up in our fight. I think he broke his arm. She killed him! She switched his pills! No one believed me, of course. They thought I was just being spoiled. Nancy looked me right in the eyes, smiling triumphantly. Fair is fair.
In January 2025, a funeral in Clearwater Beach, Florida, took a shocking turn when two sisters were arrested for fighting at their 95-year-old father's service. The altercation began after Kathleen, 66, delivered a eulogy that failed to mention Maureen's 24-year-old daughter. This omission sparked a verbal argument, escalating when Maureen, 60, chest-bumped Kathleen, who then pulled her sister's hair. Maureen retaliated by striking Kathleen's face. Captured on CCTV, the fight led to Kathleen's arrest for misdemeanor battery, while Maureen faced a felony charge due to Kathleen's age. Both women were later released but were ordered to have no contact.
The story is based on a true incident which happened in the year 2018 in Florida. A woman's prank took a wrong turn and got her arrested. More about the incident after the story. My name is Nancy Morrison, and I was the mastermind behind one of the most disastrous and now infamous pre-wedding shoots in recent history. When I first dreamt up the idea, it seemed perfect, romantic, and most importantly cinematic. In truth, it was inspired by the scene in Spider-Man No Way Home where Tom Holland rescues Zendaya from criminals. I thought it would be the ultimate homage to my favorite film, and something that John and I could laugh about for years to come. Whenever I joked about wanting a Bollywood-style dance routine at her wedding, he'd grimace and say, "Nancy, I'll do anything you want, but please keep the theatrics to a minimum." But my love for film and drama ran deep. I was convinced a pre-wedding photo shoot that mimicked the heart-stopping hero rescues damsel moment could add a unique flair. My best friend and unofficial wedding planner, Dominic, was the only person who knew about my plan. We spent weeks organizing the details, choosing a restaurant where I'd be attacked and hiring 2 out-of-work actors to pose as robbers, timing everything so that John's arrival would coincide with my frantic phone call for help. I told Dominic, I want it to be realistic but not dangerous, just enough adrenaline to trigger John's protective instincts. He smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Sure, but you better pray he doesn't freeze up, Nancy. Last thing we need is him panicking and doing something stupid." I waved away his concerns. John might not like acting, but he's a good man. I'm sure if he thinks I'm in danger, he'll swoop in like a superhero. When the day came, I was a bundle of nerves. The restaurant had been prepped. The manager gave us permission so long as we promised not to disrupt the other customers too much. Our hired actors, Toby and Martin, were outside waiting for Dominic to give the signal. Everything was supposed to unfold seamlessly. John was home, believing I was out with Dominic picking flowers for the wedding. At precisely 6 p.m., I would call him on his cell phone, feigning panic. "John, there are these men. They're threatening me. Please come to Rossi's Bistro on Maple Street. Hurry!" Then, John would dash to the rescue. Someone would discreetly film the whole thing, and we'd have a thrilling clip to show off at a reception. It was a flawless plan. Inside the restaurant, I sat at a corner table, my stomach churning. I glanced at the clock, 5:58 p.m. I signaled Dominic, who then texted Toby and Martin to get ready. For a moment, I almost lost my nerve. Something felt off. Maybe it was the hush in the restaurant, or the suspicious glances from a few patrons who recognized the 2 rough-looking men lurking outside. But I ignored the gut feeling and proceeded with the script. At exactly 6 p.m., I dialed John's number. My voice shook, partially from genuine anxiety.
John, there are these men. They're harassing me for my purse. Oh God, I'm scared. Please, can you come to Rossi's Bistro now?
He stammered.
What? Nancy, stay calm. I'll be there as soon as I can, okay?
Then he hung up. My heart was pounding. I wiped sweat off my brow and gave Dominic a quick nod. That was the signal. Toby and Martin burst inside, wearing black ski masks and brandishing toy guns that looked chillingly real. Their first lines were straight from a second-rate crime show. Martin yelled,
"Give us your purse, lady, or we'll blow your head off!"
A few other diners gasped in shock, clearly unaware this was all staged. Dominic was across the room, filming with his phone discreetly, trying not to laugh at Martin's over-the-top bravado. Toby grabbed me by the arm, pressing the fake gun into my side. The manager, seeing real fear on the faces of his customers, rushed forward and shouted,
"Hey, let her go!"
Toby snapped at him to back off, maintaining the illusion. More than a few patrons fled, overturning chairs and sending plates crashing to the floor. In the midst of the chaos, I expected John to burst in, breathless, maybe a little terrified, but determined to help. Instead, time stretched on. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. By then, Toby and Martin were starting to look jittery. Customers were calling the police. I was about to whisper that we should abort. But then, at last, John arrived. But he wasn't alone.
"Get down! Hands where I can see them!"
The thunderous voice belonged to an armed officer. John stood in the doorway, ghost pale, watching the scene with wild eyes. My heart seized. John had not come alone or unarmed. He had alerted the police with claims of a violent robbery in progress. Before any of us could react, Toby and Martin dropped their toy guns and raised their hands. That was the moment I realized the severity of what I had done.
"Wait, it's a setup. It was all fake. They're hired actors. The guns are toys."
One of the officers scowled at me.
"Lady, this better be a joke."
I felt tears prick my eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean..." The police were furious. They had arrived armed to the teeth, expecting a life-threatening robbery, only to discover it was a hoax. Toby and Martin were furious too, swearing they weren't informed it might go this far. And John, he looked at me like I was a stranger.
"Why would you do something this insane?"
He asked later. We were both seated in the back of a cop car, giving statements to the police. I buried my face in my hands.
"I wanted to make a memorable pre-wedding shoot. I just thought..." "You thought what? That I'd come charging in to rescue you? That I'd be some hero? Nancy, you know I hate all that. And now, look where we are."
In 2018, a dining prank at a Florida cafe turned into chaos when 22-year-old Peggy Georges texted her boyfriend, falsely claiming the restaurant was being robbed. Alarmed, her boyfriend called 911, reporting an armed robbery at Alabon Bakery, a Haitian eatery in Fort Pierce. Police, rushing with sirens blaring, arrived at the scene with weapons drawn. However, they found no crime, only Georges, who admitted the false claim was a prank. The act created a dangerous situation, risking harm to the police and the public. Georges was arrested for misuse of the 911 system, a misdemeanor, and later released from jail. The story is inspired from a true incident which happened in the year 2006 in Florida. More details about it after the story. I moved to a nice suburb outside of San Diego. Right away, I became friends with my new neighbor, Cindy. She was a wonderful woman, always smiling. Cindy always checked in on me and invited me over to her place when she thought I needed company. The more I got to know her, the more I liked her. She came from a rich family, but she gave away most of her money to charities. She spent several days a week volunteering at soup kitchens and doing community projects. She'd often go out to sketchy areas in the city just to help out. I worried about her sometimes. She was a small, dainty person, and I was scared that people would take advantage of her trusting nature. I worried about her sometimes. One day, I noticed a man dressed in a black hoodie walking on our street. He kept his head down. I was watering the front yard at the time, so I got a good look at him. I couldn't see his face, though. I didn't want to come across as a Karen, so I didn't ask him what he was doing in our neighborhood. Still, I got a bad feeling from him. At first, he was walking normally, but then he started to limp, and it was obviously fake. I saw him limp towards Cindy's front door. I walked to the edge of my yard, hiding behind the hedges but close enough to hear their conversation. Cindy opened the door and asked if she could help him. I hurt my leg. Can I come inside and use your phone? No, Cindy answered. For a second, I breathed a sigh of relief. Cindy was smart enough to see through this man's act. Then my heart dropped. You look really hurt, sir. Let me get my coat and I'll drive you to the hospital myself. She disappeared back in her house, but came out 2 seconds later wearing a thick fur coat. She led the man to her car and they both got inside. I had to do something. I ran to the car just as she was starting the ignition. Cindy, what are you doing? Oh, we're just heading to the hospital. This man needs my help. Don't worry about me. I tried to convince her to stop, but she wouldn't listen. She backed out of the driveway. From the passenger seat, the man in the hoodie looked me dead in the eyes. He was smiling. I was scared for her. I knew that man was dangerous. I could feel it in my bones. I waited in my house for the longest time, looking out the window, praying that Cindy would come back. She never did. After a while, I called the hospital to ask if someone had come in with a wounded leg. But because I didn't have the man's name, the nurse wouldn't give me any information. I tried to explain the situation to her, but she kept telling me that patient information was confidential. That night, Cindy's car finally came back. I was in the kitchen at the time, so I didn't see it park. I could hear it though. I ran out my front door and saw the car in her driveway. I didn't see Cindy, but I saw a man walking very fast down the sidewalk. He was wearing Cindy's fur coat. If I called the police, the man would be long gone by the time they arrived. I knew it was dangerous, but I ran after him. Wait! Please! Stop! The man heard me and stopped. He waited for me to reach him. Can I help you? Where's Cindy? Ma'am, I have no idea who you're talking about. I'm just going for a walk. You can join me if you want. He started walking away from me. He rounded the corner into the park next to our street. I wanted to follow after him, but I wasn't brave enough. I let him go. Then I ran back to my house and called 911. I tried to explain everything that happened, but I was pretty frantic. I don't think they understood me. By the time an officer came to my house to take my statement, I had calmed down enough to explain myself clearly. I described the fur coat and gave my best description of the man, but it was difficult. Even though I'd seen him face to face, he didn't have any defining characteristics. The officer seemed sympathetic. She took a bunch of notes and assured me that they'd do their best to find Cindy. The next day, Cindy was declared missing. Some officers dusted her car for fingerprints, but they didn't find anything. I was losing hope that she'd ever be found. Then, a few days later, I saw the same man in the same fur coat walking in front of my house. Why was he back? Was he just messing with me? He stopped right outside my window and looked in. Who are you? What do you want? He tapped the glass, smiled at me, then left. I called the police again, but it seemed like they didn't believe me. The officer said it didn't make sense for someone to kidnap my neighbor and then come back for no reason. And honestly, she was right. It didn't make sense. But that's what happened. For the next few nights, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about poor Cindy. What had happened to her. Then, one day, I went downstairs with a really weird feeling. I didn't know why. I looked around my house, but nothing looked different. Then, I noticed something hanging on the coat rack next to my front door. It was Cindy's fur coat. Terrified, I checked all my doors, but there was no sign that anyone had broken in. I called the police one last time, but the officer seemed extremely frustrated. She basically accused me of making stuff up, claiming that I was interfering with their investigation. It's been days now. I live in constant fear that the man will come back. I changed my locks and added a new security system, but I still don't have any answers. And Cindy is still missing. On January 24th, 2006, 24-year-old Jennifer Kessie vanished from her Florida condo. She last spoke to her boyfriend Alan the night before. When she missed work, her family found her condo intact, but her phone, purse, and keys were missing. 2 days later, her car was discovered at a nearby complex. But when detectives opened the trunk of the car, Jennifer wasn't there. Eventually, surveillance showed an unidentified figure parking it, their face obscured by a fence post. Jennifer had felt uneasy around some workers at her building. A housekeeper identified a suspect, Chino, but he passed a polygraph test. In November 2019, local police came out with a dive team to search the lake where an eyewitness said the piece of carpet was dumped. The team spent 2 days searching, but they didn't find anything. Michael Toretta says that there were 10 construction workers, and one of them might have abducted her.
This story is inspired from a true incident that happened in the year 2015 in New York in a beauty salon. More about the incident after the story. I remember the day I first met Kevin as clearly as I recall the moment I left him. Back then, I was a naive 20-year-old, searching for validation in a world that felt too big. He was charming at first, courteous, attentive, always quick to defend me if anyone stepped out of line. It took me 7 years to realize that his protective instincts were nothing but a facade, masking a toxic possessiveness that nearly broke me. I decided to leave him on a cold autumn evening. I felt suffocated by his jealousy. He would demand to know my every move, where I was, who I was with, and why I hadn't answered his call within seconds. When the final argument came, it happened in my tiny apartment, among scattered boxes as I was prepared to move out. He stood by the door, clenching his fist so hard his knuckles went white. "You think you can run from me, Nest?" he spat out. "I gave you everything." "You gave me nothing but fear," I replied, grabbing the last of my things. My voice wavered, but I had to stand my ground. "I'm done with this." From that point on, I tried to distance myself. I applied for a job as a cashier at a nearby beauty salon, hoping for a fresh start. The salon was bright and modern, with glittering floor-to-ceiling mirrors and colorful displays of luxury products. It provided a strange comfort, an escape from the dark memories Kevin's presence had woven into my life. My new boss, Brandon, was the polar opposite of Kevin. He managed the salon with professionalism and kindness, always addressing me and the other staff with respect. He had a warm smile that revealed a gentle sincerity, and he never pryed into my personal life. Over time, we grew closer. I found myself drawn to him, not just because he was handsome, but because he treated me like I mattered. One evening, we stayed late to tally the day's earnings, which was when I first opened up. "Brandon," I said softly, setting down my pen, "I haven't been honest about my past." He looked up from the receipts, concern in his eyes. "You don't have to tell me anything if you don't want to." "No, I want to," I said, steeling myself. I was in a relationship for 7 years with someone who, well, was extremely controlling. It ended badly, and now I'm always looking over my shoulder. Brandon didn't judge. Instead, he reached out and squeezed my hand gently. "You're safe here, Nast. I promise you that." It wasn't long after our relationship started that Kevin began lurking around the salon. I'd glance up from the register and see a figure in the distance, hidden behind tinted car windows or standing behind a corner traffic light. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, conjured by the lingering fear of our past. But then, I started getting text messages from an unknown number. One read, "I see you." Another read, Don't get too comfortable with your new manager. Worse than the messages, though, was the knowledge that Kevin knew I had a deep-seated phobia of masks. Brandon noticed my anxiety growing. One day, he confronted me in his office. "Nest, you're jumping at every sound. Did something happen again?" I hesitated before answering. "I got another text this morning, and I saw someone standing outside the salon last night, wearing some sort of face covering." Brandon's expression hardened. "That's it. I'm installing a panic button under the cashier counter. If anything happens, you'll be able to press it." Those words gave me a little bit of comfort, but not enough to quell the nightmares. About a week later, it all came to a head. It was a Friday, usually the busiest day at the salon. Women and men came in, prepping for weekends full of parties and romantic dates. I stood at the cashier desk, scanning products and chatting warmly with the clients, hoping to mask my own apprehension. Brandon worked in his office in the back, discussing supply deliveries with a vendor over the phone. Suddenly, I heard footsteps outside that sounded heavier than normal. When I glanced at the front door, I saw him. Kevin. He was there, wearing the most horrendous wolf mask imaginable. My heart felt as though it stopped. He pushed the door open. Immediately, all conversation in the salon had died. His ragged breathing echoed behind the mask as he scanned the room, looking for Brandon. All I could do was stand there, blood hammering in my ears. Every fiber of my being told me to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed. Kevin, I managed to gasp, my knees threatening to buckle. He tilted his head, mocking me with a distorted wolf grin. Then he moved towards the counter with deliberate steps. I remember what Brandon said about the button. I reached under the counter and slammed my hand against the panic button. Kevin's voice, muffled by the mask, was chilling.
"Where is your manager?"
he asked.
"Where's that new boyfriend of yours?"
I could see the other customers shrinking back, fear evident in their eyes. Part of me wanted to shout for them to run, but the words wouldn't come out. I tried to hold Kevin's gaze, though it was nearly impossible with the horrifying mask. At that moment, Brandon appeared from the back hallway. He stepped between Kevin and me, fists clenched at his sides. "Leave, Kevin," he said firmly. "You have no business here." Kevin snarled.
"You think you can just take her from me? You don't know what you're getting into."
Brandon wasn't intimidated. "She chose to leave you. You lost her when you tried to control her." What happened next was like a rush of chaotic images. Kevin lunged forward, knocking over a display of lotions and shouting. But just as he raised his arm, we all heard a wail of sirens blaring in the distance. The security button had done its job. Help was seconds away. Kevin froze, realizing his plan to attack Brandon and drag me away had been thwarted. In a final act of desperation, he spun around and ripped the cash register from the drawer. He stuffed the loose bills into his jacket and ran away. I took a shaky step backwards, feeling the adrenaline surge through me. Customers looked on in shock, and Brandon reached for me, pulling me into a protective embrace. When the police arrived, I could hardly speak. My breath became ragged gasps, and I clung to Brandon like a lifeline. We explained what had happened the best we could, how Kevin showed up in disguised, and how he threatened us, how he stole from the salon's cash register. The officers dispersed quickly, and their radios crackling with orders to pursue him. In April 2015, a masked robber struck a New York beauty salon in Spring Valley. Wearing a wolf's mask, the suspect entered Kelly's unisex salon at 4 p.m., brandishing a knife and demanding cash. The frightened employee, a 31-year-old woman, placed the money into a backpack he provided before he fled the scene. She was unharmed and quickly called 911. Authorities released surveillance footage to aid in identifying the suspect, described as 5'4" to 5'7", with a medium build. The police continued their search, urging the public for any leads. This story is inspired by the famous case of Winona Ryder. She was arrested for shoplifting. More about the case after this story. I had just woken up, still groggy and disoriented from a late-night shoot, when my phone began buzzing insistently on my nightstand. I picked it up and squinted at the bright screen. Headlines everywhere showed my face. Well, a face identical to mine, staring brazenly into a security camera. The caption read, "Famous actress shoplifts designer dress worth $10,000. I blinked in shock. The woman had my eyes, my cheekbones, even the same subtle scar on my eyebrow I got from a childhood bike accident. But I knew for a fact it wasn't me. I was in bed, in my home, hours away from that high-end boutique, yet the camera still showed a perfect replica of Ella Hart sauntering out of the shop as if she owned the place. As the initial wave of confusion and fear washed over me, my doorbell rang. My heart hammered in my chest. It was barely 7 a.m. No friend or colleague would have shown up unannounced at this hour. Without thinking, I threw in a robe and rushed downstairs. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the hallway mirror, eyes wide, anxious, and unsure of what laid ahead. I swung open the door. There stood Detective Amelia Grant, a stern-looking woman with dark hair pulled tight into a bun. Behind her hovered my manager and longtime friend, Vincent Green, both looking worried and irritated. "Ella Hart?" Detective Grant asked, holding up a badge. I could tell she was trying to mask her own surprise at seeing me in person. "I'm Detective Amelia Grant from LAPD. May we come in?" I gestured for them to enter, my hand trembling. As soon as we were in the living room, Vincent began pacing. "What's going on?" he demanded, trying to keep calm but failing. "I got a call early this morning from Fashion House's lawyer. They claim Emma stole a dress. That's impossible." Detective Grant cleared her throat. "Miss Hart, we have security footage of a woman who appears to be you walking out of Celeste Boutique with a gown valued at $10,000. The store manager identified you by name." "That's ridiculous," I said, my voice cracking. "I've never even visited Celeste Boutique on my own. I only go there for official brand events, and those are always arranged in advance. Check my schedule. I was at a film shoot last night until 2 a.m., and then I came home." Vincent chimed in. "She's telling the truth. I can vouch for her. We wrapped up the set around 2. I personally dropped Ella off at her house." Detective Grant studied me closely, her gaze lingering on my features, as if expecting to catch a hint of guilt or a slip of the tongue. "Miss Hart, do you have any idea of who this person might be? A relative? A twin?" I shook my head, dumbfounded. "I'm only a child. Both my parents passed away, and there was never any mention of a twin, and certainly not someone who looks exactly like me." The detective glanced at Vincent and then back at me. "Then we're dealing with someone who's gone with great lengths to impersonate you. I'll need to ask some more questions. Do you have any enemies? Fans that might be obsessed with you? Anyone who might want to tarnish your image?" My mind raced. Over the years, I dealt with my share of fanatics, but none had taken it this far. "I don't know. I mean, I've seen my share of strange letters and such, but no one stood out as a serious threat." The detective nodded. "All right. We need your official statement at the precinct. And Ella, I'm going to have to ask you to keep a low profile for a while. It's going to get messy if the press believes you're evading the issue." Vincent piped up. "We'll cooperate fully, Detective." "Thank you." After Detective Grant left, Vincent turned to me, exasperation plastered across his face. "Ella, we need to manage this carefully. The media will have a field day with this. We have to prove your innocence as soon as possible. The world is already painting you as a shoplifter." I sank into my couch, head swirling with dread. We have to find out who this woman is. We can't just sit around awaiting the police to do all the work. Vincent rubbed his temples. Let's make some calls. Let's see if we can find anything. Any rumor or whisper of a look-alike in the industry. The days that followed were a blur of accusations, paparazzi, and relentless media coverage. My face, her face, was everywhere. I had to cancel press events and promotional shoots. Detective Grant kept in touch, but there were no leads. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. My name was dragging through the mud, while I was practically under house arrest. Then, a small breakthrough came. Vincent discovered a social media post from a minor stylist who claimed he'd worked for a secret lookalike project on a major brand. The post was quickly taken down, but not before Vincent took screenshots. It mentioned a woman named Althea Parks, an aspiring actress who had undergone multiple surgeries to replicate a famous actress's face. My face. Vincent showed me the screenshots. Ella, I think I found her. She's been under the radar, but from what I've heard, she's desperate for fame. Sounds like she might be trying to ride your coattails, or take you down. I stared at the photos of Althea in disbelief. It was chilling to see my own features mirrored in someone else. All right, we have to bring this to Detective Grant then. We arranged a meeting with the detective at the station. When we showed her the images and post, she whistled under her breath. Oh, this changes everything. She's practically your double. Then came a phone call from a private number. I answered, and a voice almost identical to mine whispered, "You have no idea what you've done." I froze, my pulse racing. Althea, you stole everything that should have been mine, she hissed, bitterness dripping from every word. I'm tired of waiting in the shadows. I'm taking what I deserve, Ella. Before I could respond, she hung up. For a moment, I just stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear. Detective Grant took the phone from me. She tried to trace the call, but it was a burner. A week later, the police tracked Althea to a rundown motel near the edge of town. When Detective Grant burst into the place with her team, they found Althea surrounded by magazine clippings of me, old dresses she'd stolen, and even a mock award trophy with my name etched onto it. She seemed to have created an entire shrine dedicated to my life and career. In the real-life incident, Winona Ryder reflected on the aftermath of her 2001 shoplifting arrest, admitting it caused her to check out of Hollywood. After stealing $5,500 worth of clothes from Saks Fifth Avenue, Ryder was convicted and sentenced to probation, fines, and community service. She moved to San Francisco and took a break from acting. When she returned, the cultural shift in industry's treatment of women in the 2000s shocked her. Ryder revealed feeling confused about the legal process, especially when told she could face prison time. She also expressed fear about the changing media environment.
My neighbor, Harold, had a knack for borrowing things and never returning them. It started with small items, garden shears, a broom, an old hatchet, and escalated over the years to more personal belongings, like a pressure washer and even some of my daughter's toys. No matter what I did, Harold always slipped out of responsibility, claiming he'd found the items or insisting that he had every intention of giving them back. Time and time again, I was left shaking my head in frustration. I lived on the outskirts of our quiet town, and my house was right next to Harold's. It was an older neighborhood, marked by winding roads and spacious lawns. Most people there were friendly, except Harold. He kept to himself. That is, unless he wanted something. My friend and coworker Carla often joked that he had the eyes of a raven, swooping down to pick out shiny trinkets whenever he pleased. One afternoon, after I discovered my mail had been tampered with, I had a conversation with Carla in my kitchen. She was leaning against the counter sipping coffee, and I could see the anger in her eyes on my behalf. I can't believe he's done it again, she said, setting her mug down with a thud. It's like he thinks nobody can touch him. I sighed, rubbing my temples. He's so sly about it. He always does it when I'm not home, and if I say anything, he just denies it. Carla narrowed her eyes. You need to teach him a lesson. She wasn't the first person to tell me that, but she was the first whose words lit a spark in me. Maybe you're right, I replied, staring off into space. It was around this time that I ended up with a nest of European hornets in my attic. The sight had terrified me, huge menacing insects buzzing around in a growing hive. I called an exterminator, and after the job was done, I was left with a vacuum canister full of very angry, albeit momentarily sedated hornets. Carla visited me while the exterminator was finishing, standing a few feet away for safety. "You better be careful with that," she said, pointing at the shop vac the exterminator had handed me. I'd take them far away to dispose of them. Later that evening, I devised my plan. I cleaned out my old shop vacuum and carefully transferred the hornets into it. They were still sluggish from the chemicals, but I knew they wouldn't stay that way forever. As I sealed the vacuum, I laughed under my breath, imagining Harold's face when he got more than he bargained for. I kept the shop vac at the edge of my garage for a couple of days, knowing Harold's sticky fingers would start itching the moment he saw something new or expensive looking left unattended. Sure enough, I noticed muddy footprints by my garage door on the second night. He was testing the waters, seeing if I was oblivious or careless. If only he knew. Then I made my move. I placed the vacuum, my gift, in plain sight by the trash bins, right by the sidewalk. It was nighttime, nearly midnight, when I snuck over and placed it near Harold's driveway instead of my own. I hovered in the shadows, my heart pounding with anticipation. For a moment, I questioned if I was going too far. But Harold made my life miserable for years. I was done turning the other cheek. I didn't have to wait long. Around 1 a.m., I heard a rustle near the bins. I peeked out my window and saw Harold's silhouette, hunched over as he inspected the vacuum. The faint glow of a street lamp revealed his expression, one of greedy delight. He grabbed the handle and walked back to his shed, making minimal noise. It was almost impressive how stealthy he was. The next morning, I acted as though everything was normal. I worked from home that day, answering calls and sending emails. Around noon, I heard a commotion coming from Harold's backyard. I rushed to my window, peering through a gap in the curtains. What I saw made my heart race with a perverse satisfaction. He stumbled onto the grass, yowling in pain, smacking at his face and arms as the enraged insect stung him repeatedly. A small part of me wanted to run over and help, but then I thought of all the lies he told, all the times he'd stolen without a shred of remorse. My better sense won out, though. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, feigning ignorance to protect my own skin. When the police and paramedics arrived, I observed from my porch, molding my face into an expression of shock and concern. I had to make sure no suspicion fell on me, so I did what any concerned neighbor would do. I rushed over, pretending I had no clue what was happening. "What on earth happened?" I asked in a trembling voice. I saw Harold lying on a gurney, his face swollen and blotchy, eyes barely open. An officer, whose name tag read Officer Brooks, turned to me. "You got into a nest of hornets somehow." Then he paused, noticing I was looking at the old shop vac spilled on the lawn, with angry insects still buzzing around it. "Do you know anything about that vacuum?" he asked. I shook my head. I didn't even know he had one. Was that in his shed? "It appears so," Officer Brooks said, glancing at Harold's groaning form. "He's in rough shape. He'll be fine in a couple days. But those stings are going to hurt." I looked back at the vacuum, feigning surprise. I used to have one just like that. But someone stole it from me. The officer's eyebrows rose. "Stole it?" "Yes, I actually wanted to report it. I noticed it went missing from my garage a while back. I thought maybe I'd misplaced it, but I'm pretty sure it was stolen now." I forced a shaky laugh, as though I was both embarrassed and angered by my carelessness. "I'm glad you're here, officer, because I was actually going to file a report this afternoon. It's probably nothing, but this might be a coincidence or it might be something bigger. You never know." He nodded. "We'll certainly look into it. We'll ask Harold how he came across the vacuum once he's in better shape." Later that day, Carla came over, barely containing her grin when I told her the story. We had a tense moment, though, as I confessed how I might have gone too far. She shrugged nonchalantly. You gave him a taste of his own medicine, she said. Carla and I celebrated quietly that evening, sipping on wine in my living room. This story is inspired from a true story which happened in the year 2018 in Pennsylvania. The police received a disturbing call from a mother accusing her 42-year-old son. I was trying to impress my father by driving us home from a routine grocery run. My knuckles went white on the freeway. My father joked about my tension.
Andrew, he said in a calm voice, loosen up a bit. You'll end up cutting the circulation to your fingers.
I forced a grin and relaxed my grip. Sorry, I'm just a little nervous. I got precious cargo after all, I joked, glancing over at him with what I hoped was confidence. He laughed, a deep rumble that instantly made me feel safer. But in the span of a heartbeat, everything changed. A pair of headlights emerged out of nowhere, swerving into my lane. I panicked, yanking the wheel too hard to the right and crashing into the guardrail. When I looked over, my father was slumped forward, eyes shut. He didn't respond when I called his name. My mind raced. What had I done? He died at the hospital 2 hours later. My mother, who had been in the waiting room crying into her hands, collapsed when the doctor told her the news. I was too numb to move. The weeks following his funeral were a haze of guilt, nightmares, and funeral flowers wilting in vases scattered around our house. My mother, Margaret, said very little to me, but when she did speak, every word dripped with blame.
You killed him,
she hissed once, eyes bloodshot and rimmed with salt from her tears.
You destroyed our family. Now you have to make it right.
So I tried. Despite reeling from my own grief, I took on the roles my father had once carried, paying bills, fixing anything broken in the house, and gradually managing her medications. She spiraled into a severe depression. At first, it manifested as a refusal to eat. Then she would disappear into her bedroom for days at a time. She began talking to herself. I'd find her in the kitchen at night, muttering curses under her breath. When she saw me, her eyes would fill with loathing.
Don't pretend you care.
She once growled, slamming the fridge door.
If you cared, you would have died in that car instead of your father.
Despite her venom, I did care. I felt responsible, convinced that helping her heal was my penance. I attended her doctor's appointments, refilled her prescriptions, and made sure she took her antidepressants. I tried to coax her into therapy sessions. The only reason she even agreed was her fear of being locked away in an institution. It was always the same threat. If the doctors discovered how dangerous and unstable she had become, they'd take her away from me. She never voiced it directly, but the fear in her eyes told me enough. Yet behind closed doors, she unleashed her torment on me. She would lash out, throw porcelain plates or glass mugs across the living room. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I would wake to find her standing in my doorway with a kitchen knife, her fingers trembling around the handle.
I want to end you,
she would say it quietly, though she would never come closer. Afterward, she'd fall into a fit of sobs, scratch at her arms until she bled, or lock herself in the bathroom for hours. I still remember one night. My bedroom light was out, and I awoke to a sharp sting across my cheek. She had slapped me so hard I saw stars. When I flicked the lamp on, I saw her there, eyes wild, tears streaming, her nails digging into her own arms. I cradled her until she stopped screaming. The next day, when neighbors asked about the noise, I lied and said we had a minor argument about the bills. Detective Morales entered our lives about 6 months later, after a neighbor anonymously reported disturbing sounds coming from our house. I answered the door, heart pounding, worried that if anyone found out about my mother's deteriorating mental health, they'd lock her up for good.
I'm Detective Morales,
he said, flashing his badge.
Neighbors have expressed concern for your mother's well-being. May I come in?
I forced a polite smile, stepping aside. Of course, Detective. My mother's been grieving, but everything is under control. I tried to keep my voice steady. From the living room, I heard a sudden crash. My mother's voice rang out, shrill and accusatory.
Andrew, what are you doing?
She's had a rough day. I'll introduce you. I led him into the living room, where she stood among shards of broken pottery, her breathing ragged. Mom, I said softly, this is Detective Morales. He's just checking to see if we're okay. She shot me a deadly glare before forcing the most unsettling smile I'd ever seen.
Andrew's taking care of me,
she said sweetly.
We're fine.
Morales eyed the broken vase on the floor. If you're sure, he said, handing me his card. Call me if you need help. As he turned to leave, my mother's face twisted into something furious, but she remained silent until he was gone. After that, my life became a series of elaborate cover-ups. I'd do anything to avoid raising suspicion, patching up holes in the wall where she'd thrown things, buying new plates to replace shattered ones, lying about mysterious bruises on my arms. If the doctor started asking too many questions, I'd change the subject or reschedule the appointment. With each passing day, her rage grew, and my guilt deepened. One afternoon, I heard my mother rummaging through my father's old things. She emerged with a toy lightsaber, some silly gift I'd given Dad one Father's Day as a nod to our shared love of sci-fi movies. She began to sob uncontrollably.
You took him away! You deserve to suffer for the rest of your life!
Before I could react, she started swinging the plastic toy at her own arms, striking herself again and again. Red welts appeared across her forearms. Panicking, I grabbed her wrists.
What are you doing?
I asked, desperately trying to calm her. Suddenly, she bolted into the kitchen, dialed 911, and shouted,
Help! My son is attacking me!
She flung the lightsaber on the floor, tears streaming down her face, and pounded her fists against her own chest.
He's beating me!
She screamed again, practically shrieking into the phone. I stood there, frozen. When the police arrived, lights flashing outside our window, I forced myself to remain calm. The officers rushed in and arrested me as my mother collapsed into a pitiful heap on the living room floor. She looked so fragile in that moment. The trial that followed was swift. The evidence against me seemed insurmountable. The injuries on her arms, the testimony of the neighbor who'd heard her screams. Morales pulled me aside before the court hearing. Why are you doing this? He asked. There's something you're not telling me. I just shook my head. I can't, I said. It's better this way. I was sentenced to community service and mandatory anger management classes, narrowly avoiding prison. In late April 2018, a shocking case emerged in Du Bois, Pennsylvania. On April 27th, police responded to a disturbance call and found 75-year-old Joan Vargas bleeding from head and wrist injuries. She alleged that her son, 42-year-old Andrew Vargas, had attacked her with a Star Wars lightsaber, repeatedly striking her as she sat in a chair. When questioned, Andrew denied the accusations, claiming his mother was harming herself. However, police arrested him.
This story is inspired from a true incident where a woman broke away from the shackles of her abusive husband after 18 years of marriage. More on the case after the story.
Warren and I had been married for 25 years. We had our problems, mostly because Warren got angry over stupid things, but I think we were happy. We didn't have the same spark we used to, but I don't think any couple does after being together for so long. For Valentine's Day this year, Warren decided to have a romantic dinner at home instead of going out to some restaurant. I was fine with this, but then he suggested that we invite our friends Laura and Daniel over for a double date. Laura and Daniel were our best friends, but I thought it was strange that he'd want to share our Valentines with them. I didn't argue though. He'd already invited them anyway. That was my first clue that something very strange was going to happen. Warren paid a catering company to send over a grand feast. It was much more food than 4 people could possibly eat. He cleaned up our dining room and added candles for ambiance. When Laura and Daniel arrived, Warren got really excited. He invited them in and we all sat together for some pre-dinner drinks. Everyone was laughing and joking, except me, I guess. I kept staring out the window. I wanted to have a good time, but I resented the fact that I had to share my Valentines with our friends. This wasn't romantic at all. Laura was the first to notice. She leaned over and whispered into my ear. "Is everything all right with you two?" "Of course. I'm fine." Her husband noticed that we were whispering, but he didn't say anything. When it was time for dinner, Laura asked if I'd join her in the bathroom to freshen up. I thought that was a bit strange, but I followed her in. She locked the door behind us. "Okay, you have to be honest with me. Is Warren hurting you?" "What?" "You're acting weird around him. I see you glaring, and don't think I haven't noticed the bruises on your arms." I looked down at my arms. I didn't have any bruises. Outside the door, I could hear footsteps. I couldn't tell if one of our husbands was listening in on the conversation. It seemed like it. "He's not abusive, Laura." "Please stop lying. The proof is all over your face." Someone was definitely standing outside. I tried to get Laura to lower her voice, but she wouldn't. She kept telling me that I needed to stop my husband from hurting me. I told her over and over that he wasn't, but she ignored me. "You need to leave him tonight!" This conversation was going nowhere. Laura had never acted this nosy before. She'd also never been so stubborn. Maybe she was the one who was in an abusive relationship and was projecting it onto me. I pushed past her and opened the door. Daniel was standing in the hallway. I could tell that he'd been eavesdropping. He looked at me with both concern and sadness. "It's not true," I told him. Like his wife, he didn't believe me. He marched back into the dining room, where Warren sat alone at the table. He jumped up in surprise when Daniel charged at him. "I knew you were a dirtbag! How could you?" Daniel grabbed Warren by the shirt and pulled him to his feet. My husband was much larger and stronger than Daniel, but he'd been taken by surprise. He got pummeled by Daniel, falling backwards and toppling our table to the side. Food flew everywhere. Warren pushed himself back up and finally fought back. They wrestled throughout the house while Laura watched. That's when I noticed something strange about Laura's expression. She was smiling. It was like she was watching a boxing match on TV. Worse, it was like she had planned this all along. While she was distracted by the fight, I grabbed her phone. It had fallen onto the floor when the table had flipped over. I remembered her password. She was one of those idiots who use 12345. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but when I opened her recent texts, I got everything I needed to know. She and Warren had been texting back and forth for months. As I scanned through the explicit messages and pics, I knew they'd been having an affair. I felt like throwing up. Then I saw the final messages. They'd agreed to come clean at dinner tonight. That was the whole reason for this group Valentine's dinner. But then Warren had sent another message, just before they'd arrived, saying that he chickened out. He couldn't leave me, and if she said anything, he'd deny it. Her reply was, "You'll be sorry." So this fight was all part of her twisted revenge plot. By now, Warren was getting the upper hand. He had dragged Daniel out onto our balcony, where he was crouched over him, pummeling him in the face. Poor Daniel didn't deserve that. I ran out to the balcony to pull Warren off. He wouldn't. He's normally a gentleman, but if someone challenged him to a fight, he would never back down. Lord knew that would happen. As I grabbed Warren's shoulders, he pulled his arm back to punch Daniel again. I was in the way, and he accidentally elbowed me in the stomach. I stumbled backwards and almost fell off the railing. My near fall finally got the two men to stop fighting. They stood up. Through the sliding door, Laura was watching everything unfold. Her face looked disappointed. She wanted the fight to continue. Worse, she wanted Warren to shove her husband to his death. I could see it in her eyes. That was her real plan. That's why she left the balcony door open and encouraged them to take it outside. Both men were bleeding and gasping for breath. I looked them both directly in the face and said, "Daniel, Warren isn't abusive. Laura made that up to get you to fight him. They're sleeping together." "How'd you know?" Warren gasped. I thought the fight was over. We'd walk back inside and have an adult conversation. I would leave Warren. I had to. And Daniel would probably do the same to Laura. It seemed like she had gotten what she wanted. The truth was exposed. But then Daniel did something none of us expected. He grabbed my husband by the shoulders and shoved him off the balcony. Warren died on impact. When the police came, I lied. I said that Warren had fallen by accident during the fight. Laura was too busy sobbing to argue, so that was my last Valentine's Day as a married woman. It was not what I'd expected.
A domestic violence survivor, Rachel Williams finally had the courage to leave her abusive marriage after 18 years of domestic abuse. She also talks about the most horrible day of her life. That is Valentine's Day, where she was expected to cook and make love with her monstrous husband, Darren Williams. Rachel, too, would get a box of chocolates, flowers, and cards, but ultimately, they had no meaning to it. Things took a huge turn in July 2011 when he tried to strangle her and slit wrists in front of his 16-year-old son. She left and complained to the police to get him arrested, but he shot her after getting bailed at her salon, where she worked as a hairdresser. He shot her leg and also gave her punches, after which she was admitted in hospital for 6 weeks.
The story is based on a true incident which happened in Florida. A man hid a GPS tracker on a woman's car to orchestrate chance encounters. It was Friday, and my best friend Carla and I had decided to go out to a club downtown. We wanted to blow off steam after a grueling week at work. I was dealing with a major project, and Carla had her own stress from her new job at a design firm. We agreed that dancing and a few drinks would be the perfect remedy. I wore a sparkly black dress and high heels that clicked sharply on the dance floor. As the night progressed, I felt free and alive, eventually losing track of how many drinks I'd had. I guess 3 or 4, maybe 5. My head started to spin and I brushed it off as the typical buzz of alcohol. Around 2 a.m., Carla and I finally left the club. She realized she lost her grandmother's brooch, something she always carried in her purse for sentimental reasons. I promised we'd come back the next day to check the club's lost and found or ask security for help. We walked unsteadily to a cab, and I remember thinking that the headache pounding behind my eyes felt more intense than any hangover I'd ever had. By the time I got home, I was exhausted. I barely managed to change out of my dress, collapsing into bed without setting my alarm. That night, I had the strangest dream. A tall, dark-haired man proposed to me in a lavish garden filled with red roses. He slipped a ring on my finger, whispering sweet promises of eternal love and devotion. The dream felt so real that I could smell the roses and feel the soft breeze against my arms. By morning, I woke with a pounding headache and a hazy recollection of that man's face in my dream. "Carla, you won't believe the dream I had," I groaned over the phone later that morning. My head throbbed, and I assumed it was just dehydration and a massive hangover. "You sound awful," she said, her voice laced with concern. "Drink some water. I'll come over in a bit. We'll go back to the club to ask about my brooch." That afternoon, we headed to the club to speak to the manager about the lost brooch. They promised to check the security footage. Since we couldn't do more at that moment, Carl and I decided to stop by a bookstore near the club. I was browsing through crime thrillers when I froze in place. Standing just a few feet away, flipping through a hardcover novel, was the same dark-haired man from my dream. My heart skipped a beat. He glanced up, and our eyes met for an instant. Feeling embarrassed and a bit shaken, I quickly turned away. Later, as I tried to hail a cab, I saw him again. This time standing across the street near a cafe, seemingly engrossed in conversation with someone. I found it odd, but told myself it was just coincidence. When I saw him yet again at a busy intersection, I became convinced something strange was happening. "Carla, I keep seeing this man everywhere," I confessed over dinner. "He looks exactly like the one from my dream. It's starting to freak me out." "Maybe it's a sign," Carla teased, biting into her sandwich. "Or maybe you just have that dream image in your head, so you're noticing people who resemble him." Despite her logical explanation, I couldn't shake the feeling of destiny. I approached him at a flower shop a few days later. I remember feeling my heart hammering as I tapped him on the shoulder. "I'm sorry if this is weird," I stammered, "but have we met before?" He smiled, looking pleased rather than surprised. "I don't think so," he replied. "My name is Ben. I'm new to the city. My face grew hot with embarrassment. I'm Mia. It's just, I keep seeing you around. It's almost like fate is forcing our paths to cross. That evening, Ben and I spent hours talking in a small coffee shop down the street. He was charming, articulate, and attentive. Everything I'd ever fantasized about. I started believing in fate, and soulmates, and things I'd once dismissed as fairy tales. Over the next few weeks, we coincidentally ran into each other repeatedly, and he'd invited me for lunch or coffee. Every time, I felt my heart flutter. Meanwhile, Carla had been returning to the club security office to check for any news on her missing brooch. One day, she called me with a tremor in her voice. Mia, you need to see the footage they found. At first, I imagined she caught sight of a pickpocket or someone rummaging through her purse. But what she showed me on the grainy screen made my stomach twist. There was a man hovering near my drink at the bar. He casually slipped something into my glass when I wasn't looking. I leaned forward, squinting, trying to confirm the man's identity. My blood froze. It was Ben. But how was he making me see him in my sleep? He must have used some form of hypnosis while I was under the influence, planning the idea that he was my perfect match. That dream hadn't been a random vision. It was orchestrated. I'm doing this for us. He spoke calmly, as though it were the most rational statement in the world. I've known about you for a long time, Mia. I need you to realize that we were meant for each other. That's insane. He stepped closer, voice eerily soft. We belong together. I knew you wouldn't see it unless I gave you a little push. After I stormed out, I felt so violated that I didn't know where to turn first. Carla insisted we go to the police, and I agreed. On our way, she made another chilling discovery. A small GPS tracker beneath the bumper of my car. Now it all made sense. How he managed to show up everywhere I went. The next few days were a whirlwind of statements, evidence collection, and terrifying phone calls from unknown numbers. I'd hear breathing, then a click as the line went dead. Sometimes, I'd spot a dark car parked near my house late at night, its engine quietly running before it sped away. Paranoia consumed me. I slept at Carla's place, too afraid to be alone. Finally, the police were able to confront Ben. They had plenty to bring him in for questioning. My heart pounded when they informed us he had an extensive history of stalking and harassment, though he'd never been caught in such a flagrant act before. He was a textbook sociopath, they said, with a penchant for planning elaborate schemes to make unsuspecting women fall in love with him. In January, a Florida man was arrested for stalking after allegedly hiding a GPS tracker on a woman's car to orchestrate chance encounters. The 22-year-old Chipotle worker, name kept private for personal reasons, purchased the tracking device from Best Buy and secretly installed it on the victim's vehicle. The woman, who had a brief relationship with the man a few years ago, discovered the device last year and alerted authorities. Through subpoenas, investigators traced the purchase. During questioning, he admitted to the act. Arrested on a felony charge, the man was booked into jail but released after posting a $5,000 bond. The story is loosely based on a true incident which happened in Minnesota. More on it after the story. I was 26 years old, living in a bright apartment in the heart of the city. Naomi, my childhood friend and brand new police recruit, was my roommate. That particular Wednesday, everything seemed normal. Until Ryan Bennett showed up at my door unannounced. I had been seeing Ryan for several months by then. We initially matched on a dating app, where he was charming and seemed genuine. Up until that Wednesday. I only ever invited him over on weekends. So when he arrived midweek, I was immediately on edge. Ryan? I said, surprised. What are you doing here? He stepped inside, placing a small bottle of wine on the counter. I missed you, he said with a crooked smile that made my heart skip a beat. Is it so wrong for a guy to drop by and see his girl? I poured 2 glasses of the wine and we started talking about everyday things. Naomi arrived home from her first day at the police station about an hour later. She walked in, spotted Ryan, and froze as if she had seen a ghost. I could tell something was wrong. Naomi wasn't the type to scare easily. After a few awkward pleasantries, Ryan stepped outside for a cigarette, and I followed Naomi into the kitchen. She grabbed my wrist tightly and whispered, "Olivia, you need to be careful. Ryan was at the station today. His own father was filing a report on him." I felt my stomach twist. "Are you sure it was him? Maybe it was someone who looked like him." My voice shook, betraying my concern. Naomi gave me a serious look. It was definitely Ryan. I heard his name, Ryan Bennett. I couldn't get the full details, but his father was desperate to get the police involved. "You need to stay away from him until we figure this out." Before I could process what she said, we heard footsteps in the hallway. Ryan walked back inside, casually tossing his cigarette butt into the trash and smiling. His presence filled the room with tension. Naomi made some excuse about needing to call a friend and disappeared into her room, leaving me alone with him. I spent the rest of the evening in a confused haze, watching him closely. He kept asking what was wrong, and I kept saying nothing, hoping that the wine would dull my anxiety. As the night wore on, I quietly observed how he avoided talking about his family, changing the subject whenever I mentioned them. Eventually, I pretended I had an early appointment the next day and asked him to leave. "I'll see you soon," before slipping out the door. The moment it closed, Naomi emerged from her room, looking concerned. She said, "Liv, talk to me. You know something's off, right?" I sank onto the sofa and stared at the door. He's never mentioned his family before. We've been together for months, and all I know is that his parents are divorced. That's it. But now his father reported him to the police. I don't know what to believe. Naomi sighed and sat beside me. I could look into it, but it would mean risking my job in my first week. I'm barely in the force, and I'm not sure what I can access without raising suspicion. She seemed torn between her duty and her worry for me. The next few days were a blur. Ryan texted and called me constantly, always cheerful and affectionate, as though nothing was wrong. He told me he wanted to take me somewhere special the following Saturday. I played along, trying to act normal. But inside, my head was spinning. On Friday afternoon, Naomi came home from work looking pale. She shut the door and turned to me, breathless. "I dug a bit deeper today," she confessed, sitting down across from me at her tiny dining table. "It's definitely about his stepmother. His dad reported Ryan for luring her away. That's the exact phrase he used, and for taking 2 valuable watches from their family estate." I stared at her, speechless. Luring her away? Apparently, Ryan's father suspects they're together somewhere, or that she stashed the watches for Ryan to sell. But none of this has been proven. There's not enough for an arrest warrant yet. It's a messy situation. My mind reeled with questions. I wanted to confront Ryan immediately, but fear held me back. Was I dating a con artist? On Saturday, Ryan insisted on taking me out for a fancy dinner downtown. I agreed, partly out of curiosity and partly because I wanted answers. The restaurant was dimly lit, the table set with crisp white linens. He looked sharp but tense, avoiding my eyes whenever the conversation veered too close to personal matters. When the entrees arrived, I gathered my courage. "Ryan," I said quietly, my heart pounding. "Is there something you're not telling me about your family? Naomi told me she saw your father at the station." His fork froze midway to his mouth. "What did she say?" he asked, voice icy. I took a shaky breath. "He accused you of taking a stepwife, your stepmother, and stealing some expensive watches. Is that true?" Ryan's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Anger, shame, or maybe fear. "My father is insane," he said, leaning forward, his voice low. He's inventing stories because he can't accept the fact that his wife left him willingly. He's projecting all of his failures onto me. I felt a chill run through me. So you're saying none of it is true? I'm saying my father will do anything to ruin me. It's complicated. And I shouldn't have to defend myself to you. We spent the rest of the meal in an uneasy silence. Afterwards, he brushed me off with a curt goodbye. I watched him disappear into the darkened streets, my head spinning and my chest feeling uncomfortably tight. I didn't see him for days. He ignored my texts and calls. Then one evening, Naomi came home looking grim. Ryan's father withdrew the complaint, she announced. No one really knows why, but there's talk around the station. People suspect he was bought off or threatened. The stepmother is still missing. The father refuses to elaborate. My blood went cold. So Ryan might still be involved somehow? Naomi placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. We don't know. Maybe she left him and Ryan had nothing to do with it. Maybe Ryan really did lure her away. But right now, there's no case. Katie Cedarberg, a Minnesota woman, was stalked by her ex-boyfriend Mark Lasik after ending their relationship due to his controlling behavior. Lasik's harassment escalated, culminating in him setting her house on fire on August 22nd while she was inside. Police arrested him shortly after, noting a strong gasoline odor on his clothing. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison for arson and stalking. The story is inspired from a true incident which happened last year in Florida. A couple's dispute over prenuptial agreement turned violent. More about the case after the story. That night, 4 years ago, I thought I'd found the person I was destined to marry. Everything about Olivia seemed genuine and warm, and I trusted that she felt the same way about me. Those 4 years together have been a cascade of intense emotions. We clung to each other's every word, declared our devotion openly, and made grand plans. Even my older brother Mark, who was the practical one in the family, was convinced we were meant to be. He'd often tease me saying, "You two act like you're in a movie. Just don't expect the soundtrack to play in the background when reality hits." I would laugh and shrug it off, never imagining that reality would come crashing around us in such a brutal way. You see, I come from a wealthy family with a long history in business. My relatives had watched fortunes dwindle in nasty divorces before, and they viewed legal safeguards as necessary measures. So, as our wedding date approached, my family began to murmur about a prenuptial agreement. Initially, I resisted. I loved Olivia, and thought her prenup suggested I didn't trust her. Mark was the one who finally sat me down and said, "James, it's not about distrust. It's about preserving what your parents built. Think of it like insurance. You hope you never need it, but you'll be glad it's there if something goes wrong." Reluctantly, I agreed to at least consider the idea, but I had to tread carefully. Olivia never liked discussing money, and there was a hint of insecurity that flared whenever she felt we were implying that she was in it for wealth. She was sensitive about trust issues, and any mention that sounded like doubt in her motives would lead to arguments. I tried to find the right time to bring it up, but time was running short. The wedding date loomed just weeks away, and the pressure to finalize everything was overwhelming. Our engagement party had been a grand affair, and all seemed fine on the surface. But a few nights after that celebration, I attended a business acquaintance's birthday party alone. Olivia had a migraine, so she stayed at home. At that party, I danced with an old friend, just an innocent sway to some lively music. Mark was there too, chatting with some colleagues by the bar. Nothing scandalous happened, but someone recorded a brief video of me dancing, laughing, and sharing a quick hug with this friend. They posted it online. Olivia's friend saw it, and within hours, Olivia was calling me repeatedly asking,
Who is she? Why are you so close? Why didn't you tell me you'd be dancing with someone else?
That conversation was our first big fight in a long time. She had always been somewhat insecure, but this time her voice trembled with a mix of hurt and anger. I tried to explain. Olivia, it's not what you think. She's just an old friend from college. I barely kept track of her after graduation.
It was nothing but a friendly dance. But she wasn't convinced. Her suspicions were fueled by her own self-doubt. She said, "You're hiding something from me, I can feel it. Why else would you leave me at home and go dancing with someone else?" In the midst of this tension, I made the decision to bring up the prenup. It felt like the worst possible timing, but I was cornered by my family's insistence and the looming deadlines for legal paperwork. I tried to be as gentle as I could. I told her, "Olivia, I need to discuss something serious with you. My parents are concerned about legalities involving their estate. They asked me to consider a prenuptial agreement." As soon as the words left my mouth, I saw her face cloud over. She stood up abruptly, her entire posture taut as if bracing for a physical blow. She sounded breathless as she replied, "So that's it. You plan to walk away whenever you want, and this prenup will protect your precious fortune." I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "It's not that. It's just a safety measure. It doesn't mean I don't want a life with you." Instead of trying to calm down, Olivia stormed out of the apartment, refusing to engage any further. I didn't see her for the rest of the night. The next day, she came back, still fuming, her eyes red from either crying or lack of sleep. She said, "I'm done talking. If you need a contract to trust me, I'm not the wife you're looking for." Over the next couple days, we had short, hostile conversations. I felt torn. My father kept calling me, urging me to finalize the documents, while my fiancé was drifting further away. Then came the evening I'll never forget. Olivia was invited to a friend's bachelorette party. She went, drank more than she should have, and stumbled upon that video again. Probably edited to look more suggestive than it really was. Someone apparently told her, "Look how cozy James is getting with that woman. Maybe he's having second thoughts." I found out later that Olivia rushed back to my place, seething, convinced I was plotting to end our relationship the moment it became inconvenient. She hammered on the door, shouting for me to open up. By coincidence, Mark was there with me. We were discussing the prenup quietly, trying to figure out how to placate Olivia. The second she saw me, she launched into a string of accusations. "You're a liar, James!"
She screamed.
"You never loved me! You just want me under your thumb until you tire of me!" "Olivia, calm down. You're not thinking clearly." I pleaded, but she was too far gone. Mark rushed forward to restrain her, and she bit him in a manic rage. I froze, unable to process the violence coming from the woman I'd loved for 4 years. She was arrested that night. Mark and I gave our statements to the police, more out of shock than any real intention to press charges. But in our state, domestic violence is taken seriously. Olivia spent the night in a holding cell, and by morning she'd been released on bail. In July 2024, just days before their wedding, a Florida couple's dispute over a prenuptial agreement turned violent, leading to the bride-to-be's arrest. Late on Sunday night in St. Petersburg, 26-year-old Molly Rose Hogan allegedly attacked her fiancé, striking him multiple times. According to police, the victim's brother intervened but was bitten by Hogan. Alcohol was reportedly a factor in the altercation. Hogan was charged with domestic battery and simple battery before being released. A judge ordered no contact between the parties. Despite the incident, the couple's wedding registry remained online, still seeking contributions for their celebration. The story is inspired from a real-life incident, wherein the famous social media influencer Brianna LaPaglia told the world about her scary relationship with Zach Bryan. More about the incident after the story. It was love at first sight, back when I first met John. At least, that's what I thought. We were both up-and-coming influencers who had been invited to an exclusive party in upstate New York. I had already met with some success and landed some major promotions, but this was an exciting opportunity to increase my status tenfold. John had also been invited to the party, another influencer who I had crossed paths with briefly online, though it was my first time meeting in person. We hit it off immediately. He was just as funny and charming as he portrayed himself online.
and he seemed to reciprocate my interest. We kept bumping into each other at the party, sharing laughs and flirty smiles, until we could no longer deny that it was fate, and went home together at the end of the night. We met on and off a few more times before making it official. When we finally got together and made the announcement online, the whole internet went crazy. Millions of followers came in, and I found success like I only ever dreamed of. We became known as John and Ariana, one of the most famous social media influencer couples on the internet. Our individual content remained mostly the same, though our collaboration videos always got the most attention. Whether it was simply chatting, giving a brief preview into our life, or trying the latest trends. It really felt like the whole internet was rooting for us in our relationship. I really thought I'd found the one, the man I would spend the rest of my life with. Everything seemed to be perfect, until it wasn't. Once our honeymoon phase began to fade out, after those first 6 months, things started to change. John grew distant, emotionally and physically. Excuses were always on the tip of his tongue. Our content together grew sparse, and people began to notice. I was worried it would affect my views and likes, so I begged him to do another video with me just to appease our followers. Eventually he would agree, but he always made me feel guilty or needy for having to plead with him to do it, like he didn't really want to. I felt like our relationship had grown stale, like he had finally gotten bored of me. Yet as soon as I considered breaking up with him, he would change his tune and come crawling back, acting like he really did need me and that things would be better as long as we stuck together. Our relationship continued like this for the next few months, going from emotionally detached to emotionally dependent. Hating being in the same room to hating being apart, and things only grew worse. The contrast between the hate and the love between us grew. One minute we were shouting abuse at each other, the next we were sobbing that we couldn't be apart. I knew I had gotten myself in a toxic loop, but I couldn't bring myself to leave him, no matter what. Almost a year into our relationship, we were invited to do an interview with another influencer. John was unenthused about it, but I told him we needed the exposure to keep our followers engaged, so he finally ended up agreeing and we went. That was our biggest mistake. John was in a sour mood from the get-go, and I was struggling to keep up an appearance of being in love with him when his very presence had begun to annoy me. The interview started off awkward and only got worse from there. John, tell me what you love the most about Ariana. The interviewer's voice was completely innocent, as if she also believed that our relationship was how we portrayed it online. John looked me in the face and sneered. Love? I don't love anything about her. His words sent a spark of shock and pain through me, which quickly turned to anger as he continued speaking. She is a whiny, bratty, needy child. Everything she puts online is a lie. Try living with her for a week and you'll soon go insane. You... I stood up so suddenly the chair rocked back behind me. You're no better. You're just a liar and a cheater. John stood up too, his face growing red with anger. How dare you? How dare you? He took a threatening step towards me, his whole body shaking in anger. I reflexively grabbed the chair behind me, holding it in front of me like a shield. The interviewer watched the whole exchange in shocked silence. I knew the camera was still rolling, but I didn't care. I couldn't believe the man I thought I loved would say something like that about me in public. When he saw me pick up the chair, he picked his up as well, a vein bulging in his forehead. Afraid he was going to attack me with it, I threw the plastic fold-up stool towards him with an angry cry. The chair snapped shut and skittered past him as he stepped to the side. All right, that's enough. Put the chair down before I call security. The interviewer finally interrupted. She's the one who threw her chair first, John argued, tossing the chair to the ground with a loud clatter. Because you're scaring me. It wouldn't be the first time you've hurt me. You lying! Security! After the interview, we were both escorted off the property. No longer an illusion about mine and John's toxic relationship, I immediately packed my bags and went to stay with one of my friends for a while. During this time, John and I both filed lawsuits against each other for the public display of threat. In the end, our lawsuits made it to court, where we were both deemed abusive. As a result, we were both ordered to pay a fine and attend counseling. Brianna LaPaglia recently opened up about her tumultuous relationship with Zach Bryan, alleging emotional abuse and infidelity. Speaking on the BFFs podcast, Brianna revealed that Zach love-bombed her, only to later isolate and emotionally break her down. She shared how he made her feel like everything was her fault and caused her to lose touch with herself and her loved ones. Describing the past year as the hardest of her life, Brianna also alleged that Zach offered her $12 million in a New York apartment in exchange for signing an NDA to remain silent about their relationship.
This story is inspired from a true story which happened in New York, where a woman conned her friends, banks, and hotels. More details later.
I had a terrible childhood. My family was so poor that there were times when we didn't have any food in the house. My parents tried to provide for us, but Dad was always out of work and Mom wasted her money on gambling. I never told anyone because I was so embarrassed. When I was in high school, I started shoplifting clothes. I was surprisingly good at it. When I was at school, I acted like the happiest person alive. I started making friends, though I never invited them over to see the real me. Most nights, I'd convince my friends to have me over for dinner. That way I was getting steady meals. One of my friends, Becky, eventually found out, but she agreed to keep my secret and even helped me with money whenever she could. I stopped talking to her after graduation because I wanted to leave my messed up childhood far behind me. But at the time, she was a lifesaver. I'm 27 now, and my life couldn't be any different. All my friends are filthy rich. I have an amazing boyfriend, Derek, who lavishes me with gifts. I only wear designer clothes like Gucci and Louis Vuitton. I barely have a cent in my bank account, but that doesn't matter. I act like a socialite, so people just automatically assume I have money. I often go out partying with friends, but I've learned how to trick them into always paying the bill. It's a lot easier than you think. All I do is say things like, "I'll take you out for drinks next time," or, "I'm sorry, can we use your card? I forgot mine in my other purse." Worked every time. My friends were so rich that they didn't notice or didn't care. Derek and I were getting pretty serious, so I figured that a marriage was in our future. Once that happened, I'd have all the money I'd ever need. All I had to do was maintain my lifestyle for another few months without anyone discovering I was a fraud. Then something terrible happened. I had just woken up after a wild party at Jarway. I had a terrible hangover and could barely remember the night before. We danced a lot, and since Derek was out of town, I made out with some really hot guys. I sort of got into an altercation with some trashy girls who didn't belong there, but that kind of thing usually happened. As someone who pretends to be rich, it's important to act bitchy toward the people below me. Anyway, that morning, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of my bank account. It showed that I only had a couple $100. It came with a short message. "Want me to send this to your socialite friends?" My heart sank. I had no idea who would do this to me. But if they followed through with the threat, I'd lose everything. Derek would leave me. All my friends would abandon me. I'd have nothing. I called the number. A woman answered. I didn't recognize the voice. "Have I got your attention?"
Who are you?
"Just a stranger. Now listen carefully, or I'll ruin your life." The woman explained that she would expose me that day unless I paid her off. Since I didn't have any money to give, she'd accept payment in clothes and jewelry. She knew about all the expensive things that I'd accumulated over the years, and she wanted them for herself. I tried to bargain with her. I offered to give her 3 dresses and 2 handbags, but she knew that I had much more than that. She wanted everything. To show that she was serious, she sent another photo. This one was from me as a child, standing in front of her trailer, wearing a dirty hand-me-down dress. "I have lots more, so what do you say?" I eventually gave in. I got out 3 suitcases and started stuffing all my favorite possessions inside to make sure I was giving her everything. She made me switch to a video call so she could watch me clean out my closet. She didn't turn on her own camera, of course. After 20 horrible minutes, I'd packed away thousands of dollars worth of my belongings. Then she gave me an address where I could drop everything off. Sobbing, I took the suitcases down to my car and left. The address was in a terrible neighborhood 1 city over. I hated driving to a place like that. It was dangerous. Worse, it was trashy. I followed my GPS to the exact location where a woman was waiting for me. She looked about my age, though she was quite unattractive. The kind of person who really didn't spend any time taking care of herself. Before I got out of my car, I tried to figure out if I knew her. Then it hit me. She was one of the women I insulted the night before. She'd come into the club wearing Walmart clothes and too much makeup. She didn't belong there, and I said that to her face. Was that why she was blackmailing me? Because I was slightly mean to her at a party? I got out of the car. She was grinning at me. "So, do you recognize me now?" I told her I remembered her from the club. That wasn't the right answer, apparently. Her face twisted in anger, and it looked like she was fighting off the urge to lunge at me.
You really don't know who I am?
I shrugged. That's when she lunged at me. She shoved me hard against my car, screaming into my face.
I'm Becky! You still don't recognize your former best friend?
I pushed her back. Now that she introduced herself, I did recognize her from my childhood. The years had not been kind to her. I understood why she was so angry that I'd insulted her, and why she had photographs from when I was a kid. Once she calmed down, she explained that she worked at my bank and was able to get a photo of my account information. She also said that after I'd gotten her kicked out of the club, she spent all last night gathering all my contacts and planning a revenge. I tried to apologize, but it was too late. She still wanted me to give her all my stuff, so I did. I wheeled out the suitcases full of my priceless belongings and left that at her feet. That was all she wanted. She deleted the photos from her phone and told me to leave. She never wanted to see me again. I apologized again, though she still didn't believe me, and I drove back home. I was sad to lose so many valuable things, but at least my reputation was safe. That was my most important possession after all. But when I got back to Derek's place, my phone started buzzing. All at once, I got texts from dozens of my friends. I was too afraid to open them. I also got a text from Derek. That one I had to open. Get out of my house, now. Even though I'd given Becky everything she'd asked for, she still exposed me to everyone. My life was ruined. That afternoon, I drove all the way back to my parents' trailer. I had no place else to go.
Anna Delvey, born Anna Sorokin, posed as a wealthy German heiress to infiltrate New York City's elite. After moving to NYC in 2013, she conned friends, banks, and hotels by promising repayments and using fake wire transfers. Between 2013 and 2017, Delvey lived lavishly, networking with celebrities and CEOs while leaving unpaid bills. She devised the Anna Delvey Foundation, a luxury members-only club, and attempted to secure multi-million-dollar loans through fraudulent means. In 2017, after abandoning a friend with a $62,000 bill in Morocco, Delvey was arrested and charged with stealing $300,000 and attempting to steal $22 million.
The story is inspired from a true incident which happened in San Diego 4 years ago. A woman reported a break-in to a bank. More about the incident after the story. I'd been on the streets for months, drifting from one bustling neighborhood to another. In that time, I met all kinds of drifters and mischief makers. My two closest pals were Marty and Lucy, both as fond of shortcuts and thrill-seeking as I was. Marty had once orchestrated a string of petty restaurant thefts, and I joined him whenever I felt especially hungry or bored. Lucy, on the other hand, was the brains of our trio. She could charm her way into any party or building, spinning tales so convincing you'd swear she was royalty. We'd spent that evening behind the old bus depot, passing around a bottle. Lucy started joking about how I was fearless when it came to getting what I wanted. She said, "Jenny, you'll do anything to eat, right?" I laughed, a warm buzz in my head. You know me too well. Food first, trouble second. Marty leaned in, eyes dancing with the kind of excitement only booze can bring. He said, I dare you to sneak into the nearest building and use their microwave to heat up these. He pulled 2 frozen Hot Pockets from his coat pocket, brandishing them like they were contraband. You're out of your mind, I replied, laughing, but I was already intrigued. As someone who once stole lobster from a 5-star restaurant's kitchen, I wasn't exactly above a foolish dare. Plus, the thought of that warm, gooey snack had my stomach growling. It'll be fun, Lucy chimed in. Think of it like our signature stunt. No one else would be crazy enough to do it. I grinned, grabbed the Hot Pockets, and shoved them into my own pocket. I was wearing a black hoodie, black pants, basically dressed like a stereotypical robber. We stumbled down the street until we spotted a tall building with bright lights still on. I assumed it was just another office complex, maybe with a staff lounge that had a microwave. In my drunken state, I ignored the giant bank logo shining above the entrance. Lucy nudged me. Go on, Jenny. Show them what you're made of. I took a deep breath, pulled the hood over my head, and slipped through the front doors. It was late, so the lobby was almost empty. In my hazy mind, I thought I could just sneak around until I found a break room or something that resembled a kitchen. The security guard was nodding off at his post, and I slunk past him, heart pounding in my chest. I should have realized something was wrong when I noticed bulletproof glass windows and huge steel doors leading to rooms marked vault. But I was on a mission for a snack, so I didn't dwell on it. Finally, I spotted a small staff lounge tucked in a corner. I let out a little whoop of triumph when I saw a microwave on the counter. I popped in the first Hot Pocket, pressing the start button. The whir of the microwave was like music to my ears. I was so caught up in watching that rotating pastry that I didn't notice someone standing behind me until I heard a gasp. A woman in a blazer stood there, eyes wide with alarm. Before I could speak, she bolted out of the lounge. Panic lanced through me, but all I could think was I better grab my Hot Pocket before I run.
Stop! You're not supposed to be here!
The security guard shouted, charging into the room, but it was too late for warnings. The woman had already called the police, convinced I was some armed burglar. Sirens wailed in the distance, and my heart sank. Just my luck, I muttered, yanking open the microwave to grab my barely warmed Hot Pocket. Marty and Lucy were nowhere in sight, probably waiting for me outside. Or maybe they run off once they realized which building I entered. When the cops burst in, guns drawn, I held up my hands, the steaming snack still clutched in one fist. One officer, a tall, gruff-looking man, blinked in confusion.
What the? Are you heating up food?
He asked, disbelief dripping from every syllable. Listen, it's not what it looks like, I stammered, half laughing and half terrified. I was just warming up dinner. The second cop, a wiry woman with sharp eyes, took one look at my clothes and shot back. Oh, I'm sure this is just a big misunderstanding, right? I shrugged, trying to stay calm. I swear I didn't mean to break in. I'm just hungry. But there was no mercy in their eyes. They patted me down, cuffed me, and marched me outside to a chorus of flashing lights. Marty and Lucy were gone, and I felt a surge of betrayal. My so-called friends had dared me into this fiasco and then vanished when the heat got too intense. 4 years ago, on a quiet Wednesday morning in Chalice View, San Diego police responded to a security alarm at a Wells Fargo bank. Arriving just after 3:15 a.m., officers discovered a shattered window and learned from security cameras that a man was still inside. The suspect, a homeless man seeking food, broke in to heat Hot Pockets in the break room microwave, eating 2 sandwiches before being apprehended. Officers with guns drawn ordered him to surrender, eventually sending in a K-9 to ensure compliance. The man was arrested without incident. No injuries were reported.